Good evening. I'm Stephanie Davis with the Tennessee Freedom Coalition, and welcome to the Tennessee Thunder Podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Davis, and tonight we have a very special guest joining us, Mr. David Seal. Tonight, as you may have heard, we are discussing the pros and cons of zoning, because that is a topic that has come up in Union County and across the state. If your county has discussions about zoning, this is a good place to start tonight, because I believe we're going to get an education from Mr. Seal. Welcome to our podcast, David. David, I just want to give him a little intro here to kind of give you a background. He is a retired Jefferson County educator. David is a recognized artist. He's a local businessman. He's a 917 Society volunteer and current chairman of the Jefferson County Republican Party. He has also served Jefferson County as a county commissioner and is a citizen lobbyist for the people on issues such as eminent domain, property rights, education, and broadband accessibility on the state level. Welcome, Mr. Seal, to the podcast. What say you in Jefferson County?
I'm glad to be here, Stephen. We finally, and I just can't tell you how happy I am to be here.
Absolutely. I think we've been trying for over a month, so we finally made it.
Right.
Well, we have some questions, of course, for you. We are your students tonight, I included. Just want to know how zoning works. And so I've got a list of questions for you, and we'll just start question one. So tell us, I've talked a little bit about you, but tell us a little more about yourself and how you kind of got involved in politics.
Well, it's very simple. This happens to everybody sometime in their life. The government tries to do something to them that they shouldn't do, and that was my case. 10 years ago, the Chamber of Commerce in this county, Jefferson County Chamber of Commerce, and its sister organization, EDOC, tried to persuade the county government to take my farm away from me, that's been in my family for 5 generations, for an industrial park. And it wasn't just my farm, it was 102 other properties. And if you've ever driven on Interstate 40 or 81, this is the 2-mile long tract of property that runs north of the Interstate 40-81 intersection. The Chamber of Commerce was trying to get the county to take that entire 2-mile swath of property, 2,973 acres, away from us property owners for an industrial park for private gain. That's what propelled me into this. And this year in the legislature, we have gotten our 3rd major eminent domain legislation through the legislature to protect property rights. So the event 10 years ago propelled me into it. I got into politics reluctantly. We have fought for property rights ever since, and that's probably enough to get us started.
Well, I've found in my experience that most county commissioners that actually are good have such a passion as you. They usually get involved because something has affected them, and they want the people to be the ones in charge, and not be told or dictated what to do by their county governments. Right. And so that is a wonderful calling that you've described. So as far as the zoning in Jefferson County, what has progressed in Jefferson County since you've been involved as far as zoning itself? How did that come about?
Well, if it's okay with you, I'm going to go back here a few years and kind of tell you how we got zoning started in the county, what got that going. And in the process, I'm going to disappoint absolutely every one of your listeners on one side or the other, depending on what position they take on this, because it is a very sharp, double-edged sword. The idea of zoning is just, there's tremendous detail in it. So let me kind of tell you Jefferson County's experience, and it will bring it into perspective. In the mid 1990s, we're right here off two interstates. We got 5 interstate exits in the county, and we were growing like leaps and bounds. At that time, our school system was an excellent one, and childbearing age people were moving in here by the thousands, not by the hundreds, but by the thousands. We were in a boom of booms. So fast was the influx of people that we had to start thinking about building schools. And in order to do that, we had to offset the cost some way or another. And the idea was to charge an adequate facilities tax on new construction, $1 per square foot, which, by the way, was just raised in the most recent meeting of County Commission. And the idea there was to have a revenue source that would help us pay the debt of school buildings. On top of that, we had numerous trailer parks being brought into the county, organized, developed, whatever you want to say. Tremendous amount of property was being absorbed and developed into trailer parks, and people didn't want trailer parks in the county. If there was one, they wanted some regulations on it. So the only way you can do these things that I just mentioned is if you have a zoning department, a building inspection department, and codes enforcement department. You can't charge adequate facilities tax unless you have a building inspection department. So we went through the whole thing in 1998 and put zoning in because people were afraid of trailer parks and they wanted to have a source of income to pay for schools. The fact that zoning would protect certain property owners from intrusion, and so in other words, it was a secondary thing. That's what I'm getting at here. It was the fact that zoning would come in and keep an ammunition factory from coming in next to a subdivision was secondary to the motivation of stopping trailer parks and having income to build schools. Okay, so that's how Jefferson County got into it. In practice, zoning is not always fair because when someone comes along and they've got some money and influence, they get exceptions to the zoning that's in place. For example, if you have a person, a wealthy or well-connected person who wants to come in and put in a rock quarry or like I said, an ammunition factory or something, there's plenty of cases where they will just make an exception and do what's called a spot zone. And that benefits the special interest, and it tramples on the property rights of the people who have homes and subdivisions and swimming pools and everything else. So as long as you use it properly, I think it can be a good thing to protect certain property rights. So that's my introduction to this.
Okay. So as far as, does it matter who zones? Like if you have county commissioners that may not necessarily be on the side of the people, maybe they have some special interest themselves, or, not to say that all county commissioners are corrupt or anything, but that they have a personal goal or they have something they see as beneficial, even though the public may say no. Do you think it really matters who forms the zoning and what kind of things they do through the zoning to protect the interest of the people?
Okay, to get the answer to that question started, you have a variety of things in your county right now. So if you were to put zoning in right this minute, there would be certain things grandfathered in because they already exist. You'll have machine shops and garages and farms and maybe some manufacturing, that sort of thing. So those things will go on the maps as whatever they are: industrial, agricultural, commercial, residential. All of that'll be on the map because you can't go back and tell somebody they can't do something just because you put zoning in. So that grandfathers everybody in. From that point forward, you have a zoning resolution that describes what can go in agricultural property, what can go in commercial property, residential, manufacturing, and so on. Where it gets kind of sticky is the enforcement of those things, because if someone comes along and they want to put an industry in an industrial zone, no problem. You've already got it zoned. That's what it's for. They buy the property in the industrial zone and they set up shop. The problem comes when you have someone who wants to put a industrial slaughterhouse next to a subdivision. That happened in Jefferson County. And we just had a big brouhaha over whether or not it was acceptable. And county commission was given an option to change the zoning to a higher level of zoning, as I understand it, so the slaughterhouse could come in. Well, the people who lived along that road, who already had homes and swimming pools and yards and everything, didn't want to be right next to that. So as a result, the county commission took a vote and they decided not to expand the zoning from I-1 to I-2 or to give an exception for that business. I can't remember the exact details, but anyway, it didn't come in, and everybody on both sides of the issue was disappointed. And mainly they were disappointed because it takes over a year to get a kill date on a slaughterhouse. I mean, it hurt the farmers, and there was no good answer to it. And so that's the kind of thing you run into. We've got one now where a work stop order was placed on an open pit rock quarry. Well, the open pit rock quarry was initially approved by our zoning office because it was just rock removal from a tract of property. It turns out that it was determined to be a violation of the zoning. After the company had operated for a year, they give them a work stop order 2 days ago. And that's going to be litigated. Both parties are going to litigate that for eternity, I suppose. So there's those issues that unless you are prepared to deal with them in a equitable way, you're going to have that over and over and over and over. If you put zoning in, make sure you do it right and follow the rules.
So what I'm hearing you say is you're opening the county up to litigation. Possibly.
Absolutely, 100%. Yes. Anytime that one of these things is disputed, especially like in this rock quarry thing, we let them operate for a year, apparently in violation of our own zoning code. And then finally, the residents rose up, and the county Board of Zoning Appeals examined the issue and decided they were in violation of the zoning ordinance. Sent them a stop order, and here we go. We know it's going to lead to litigation.
Well, that makes sense. Now, one of the questions that I have is concerning certain types of business. And when you have a county that is divided into certain zoning areas, let's say you have a bookkeeper or an accountant that wants to be set up in their residence. And, a lot of business owners do that. They run right out of their house. What have you seen, if anything, that has made it difficult for a citizen to run their own business out of their own neighborhood, if any? Have you seen any problems with that in zoning?
I've seen it in Hamlin County, but I have not seen it in Jefferson County. There are eye doctors, accountants, people who, cosmetologists, that sort of thing, who just have a cottage business in their home, and it's never been a problem in Jefferson County, but it could be. And I have seen examples of that in Hamlin County, where the county codes enforcement stops and tells someone they can't wash vehicles in their yard. They were detailing vehicles in their driveway. Apparently somebody complained about that, and here they went to stop the person from making a living by cleaning vehicles, and was no problem to the neighborhood. It was just a violation of their ordinance, and apparently put a stop to it. So you have things like that a lot of times that will happen to somebody if they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I hazard to say it depends on who it is. And if it's somebody's cousin who's in the public life, or some politician's relative or something, maybe they won't get hit. And somebody like me who's out trying to survive, they get run over because their neighbors complain. So you have to consider, like I said, enforcing it in a fair way if you're going to have it.
So have you seen good examples of such zoning when it's fair, where they have some sort of an appeal board? I don't know how that works. Explain that to us. If someone feels they're being wronged.
There's three public bodies that deal with it. The county commission or city council deals with zoning in the municipality that they're in. They're the ones who design the resolution, decide what kind of business can go in A1, what can go in B2 or whatever. There is a board of zoning appeals that has to be set up, and that's a statutory. It's a creation of statute. You have to have a board that will address any appeals that are made to zoning, or examine any issues where zoning has not been enforced properly. And then you also have regional zoning boards for each of your cities and your county government, and that's a recommendation board. They will recommend certain things, and if you're going to change your existing zoning code, it has to go in front of each of the municipal zoning boards and in front of the county regional board before it gets to Jefferson County or Union County or whoever, who is going to make the final decision. That would be county commission, who has the ultimate final decision on that.
So who serves on those zoning boards? I mean, how are they appointed?
Boy, that's a good question. We've got a controversy going here in the county on that. The people in two different areas of the county, I had mentioned the rock quarry, and I had also mentioned the slaughterhouse controversy that was up here. The people in the county, especially in those two geographic areas, found out that the people who were going to make these decisions were appointed, and they are mayoral appointments. So your county mayor would appoint, and I think in some of the cases the county commission goes through a confirmation process on those. I would have to go back and look if it's a direct appointment. It could possibly be on the BZA a mayoral appointment, but I'd have to check and see if it was confirmation or not.
Yeah, that's how many of our, like the solid waste board and all the boards that we have and the committees are all appointed by the mayor. And that's actually an annual appointment.
Yeah. I think the county mayor of Jefferson County, who's a friend of mine, by the way, is probably getting a lot of calls from people who are disgusted with the decisions made by those boards. And they're asking him why he put such people on those boards that would make decisions against their property interest or against their special interest. So your mayor is going to catch it from all sides when these appointments are made, especially when somebody figures out that these appointed people that are not elected are the ones that get to decide what happened to their property and their neighborhood.
And as we both know, boards can be stacked in theory.
No, they are stacked.
They are stacked.
Boards are stacked.
Right, exactly. Which is why we get into these crazy discussions. All right. So on one side, who benefits the most from zoning, in your opinion, as far as the citizens or the businesses? Who do you think benefits in any way from zoning?
In theory, both sides will benefit. And I say that simply because you have areas in your county that are grandfathered in. Those zones are already established, and zoning would make it difficult to add territory to an industrial zone or to a residential zone without uh, some elected board like the county commission approving of that. Now, if you have zoning in your cities, their city government controls that. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, as long as it's handled well and common sense is used to establish the zones, I think everybody would benefit from it. The problem comes when you have a zoning that's out of place and some special interest wants it changed for their benefit, and then you have standing room only in the courthouse and everybody just raises hell over it. You see that 3 or 4 times a year in counties where there is zoning and where decisions are made that's not always in the best interest of the people.
So, who have you seen in your experience hurt the most by zoning? And I may be asking these questions several different ways, but have you seen any particular type of group or entity hurt by zoning repetitively?
I think people who purchase property out in a rural farming community that don't really understand zoning are hurt because 5-10 years after they purchase their property and build their home, something comes in next door like an RV park or a campground or a tourist attraction or something like that. Those people are hurt in the sense that all of a sudden their traffic patterns change, the public safety around that traffic pattern changes, and they're upset because something out of place has been moved in next door to them. And the other thing that comes up too, like in Jefferson County, A1 has in it lots of different types of businesses. I happen to own one. It's an agritourism business. We have a event and wedding business on my farm, and it hurts no one. It's so isolated, nobody hardly sees anything. But that's allowed in A1. And if there were residences next door, and I were to open one, it may the noise and traffic may affect somebody if it were to be put in the wrong place. So you see those situations.
So, is zoning just a part of growth and or a natural part of a county's development, in your opinion?
I think it should be part of the zoning and growth process. Counties are supposed to have a growth plan. And our county right now is woefully behind on updating theirs. And then what happened in Jefferson County is that years ago, we made one which is now outdated, and we never went by it. People didn't even know of its existence. So unless you have a document that guides you and you actually practice it and you actually use it to guide your development, then you're going to have a lot of people that are really upset and really didn't understand the process behind the growth plan and how it works along with zoning. So we're in the process right now of surveying our public. In fact, the survey process is over with, and our long range planning committee is making recommendations to the zoning ordinance, the zoning resolution in the county, so it can be properly updated to reflect the interest of the public.
So, we have here in Union County, I believe it's May 19th, we have a zoning meeting in Sharps Chapel. And that's where the chicken farm that everybody's familiar with that lives here in our county is located. And that's one of the areas, I guess you'd say, sore spots that really got everyone's attention about how these companies can just purchase agricultural land and there's not a thing you can do about it. And
Right.
so that's how the whole zoning thing kind of got started a few years ago. But as we've come forward, it has progressed. People are beginning to actually say zoning out loud. but there's a lot of negative perception about zoning because people have heard the horror stories. You never hear the good stories, only the horror stories. So going forward in this meeting on May 19th, I believe that's the date, in Sharps Chapel, what questions should the citizens be asking of their commissioners in regards to how zoning would work in our county so that it's properly set up, properly researched, and the citizens can make sure that, as well as we can possibly do, that this thing doesn't turn into a cluster, where people actually have good protectionism for the citizens inside any possible zoning.
In that what you described is possible, I would say it's going to take a massive effort by your population in Union County to show up and demand that your elected leaders do this properly and in a way that is fair to everybody. And that would be different in any community. But I am going to say this: if you don't show up and your community fails to impress upon their elected officials to do this right, and they fail to participate in the process, then hell is going to ensue every time something special comes along that somebody wants, and say, well, how did we get here? Well, you didn't show up to participate in your government. If you didn't show up to participate, you're going to get whatever they put on the books.
Exactly. Well, they had a meeting planned this past month, and everybody was fired up. Everybody said, I'm going to be there. I mean, people I'd never heard of before. And they canceled it. So I don't know if that was really because of someone canceling from the state that was supposed to come in and explain everything, or if that was just because they were feeling the heat. So, there's several things that people don't like hearing, and that's taxation and regulation. Right. And so a lot of people have just they feel like they're overwhelmed with not only what's going on here in Union County, but also what's going on across the country and how they're being affected. So people are just not in a very good mood right now when it comes to trying to process any other pressure from their local governments.
Well, I will say this. I think this is real important to say. Mm-hmm. I hope everybody in your community over there watches this broadcast and listens to what I say and what I've told you about what happened in Jefferson County. And it inspires them to show up at their public meetings and put into this process what they feel like is fair for Union County. If they don't do it and something ends up on the books, it is a whole lot harder to fix once you get it on there than it is to do it right to start with. It's terrible, and you have to get people. You have to get county commissioners, city council. If it's a city vote, you have to get the city alderman to vote for it. I don't know how many incorporated cities you have in Union County, but this has got to be done right to start with. And if I can impart anything to the people that listens to this, it is to get out of your house and go to that meeting and impress on them to do it properly.
Absolutely. Well, can you think of any other contributions you want to add to what we've already discussed that I've not brought up in a question?
I have already upset everybody who's going to listen to this. I think the key to whether it's a zoning issue or a fire department issue or a taxation issue or anything, it entirely depends on how engaged the public is. And one of the things that I have always been about is engaging the public in the process, because the residents don't need to think what they're going to do. That government belongs to them, and they need to get out and work it and own it and participate in it and speak out on it and write letters on it and call people and not let the people who have been temporarily loaned the power of holding office do something that you don't want them to do. They need to be instructed, as our sacred Tennessee Constitution allows for them, which is in Article 1, Section 23. If you have a minute, read that. When you have the right to instruct your representatives and petition them for grievances, and get on with it.
Absolutely. I would love to have you on a future podcast to maybe discuss eminent domain, if that would be something you might be interested in at another time. We always love to learn new things. And then, with eminent domain, we just never know when that's going to hit us. And so
I would
anything
love
like
to
that.
do that. Love to do that.
Yeah, that's something that I used to read a lot about back in several years ago, because I had friends that were affected by eminent domain
Right.
use, and it didn't turn out too well for them, unfortunately. But
Right.
yeah, we need to learn about these government processes, because we have power right at our fingertips if we just exercise it. Like you said, go to the meetings, get involved. We're at a time in our history, we can't sit on the couch anymore and hope somebody else is going to come in and save us. So
Right.
very good advice, Mr. Seal, and we appreciate you coming onto the podcast. Do you have anything else you want to say before we close for the night?
No, I'm just happy that you want to know more about eminent domain. I worked on it for about 10 years, and we made tremendous progress on it in the state of Tennessee, and spent most of the past legislative session working on it. And I'd like to come on and discuss those new state laws, if you would.
Perfect. We'll get that set up here shortly. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us here, Tennessee Thunder Podcast. Until next week, I'm Stephanie Davis, your host. We'll see you then. Have a great week.